Welcome to the In Between podcast. I am excited to introduce Kirsten Larsen, founder of Peace of Wellness and Mindset Coach. She is focused on helping individuals and organizations support their mental health, interpersonal skills, and personal and professional performance. Kirsten, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
I'm so excited to have you here because I feel like you're just a wealth of knowledge on all things. And you also have your own podcast, which we're going to talk about as well. But I would love for you to give us a little bit of a background on your story and how you ended up founding Peace of Wellness.
Yeah, well, thank you. So I am actually an occupational therapist. That's what my master's was in. And in a little bit of a unique manner, I worked in inpatient psychiatry for the bulk of my career. A lot of people know occupational therapy to be similar to physical therapy, actually, in a lot of settings. But I was always super passionate about the psychiatric route and committed to finding that, which led me randomly to Baltimore, where I had never been, didn't know a single person, and moved to, again, not knowing anyone, just took a job out of grad school. But yeah, working in inpatient psychiatry, absolutely loved it. They're locked units where adults either attempted or planned suicide, attempted or planned homicide, or were unable to care for their basic needs. And I absolutely loved it, honestly. I worked in Baltimore, I worked in Seattle, and it's a population that's super near and dear to my heart. When I moved to Vegas, there really isn't the same role in that setting. And that's what I took this detour into commercial real estate, which, for the right person, I would recommend. For myself, it was not great. I'm not a shark. I'm not sharky. I'm not really this super savvy salesperson. So it wasn't a great fit for me. And it pushed me back into wanting to work in wellness. And it's really just who I am, what I care about, what I'm always talking to friends and family and strangers on the street about. And so I started the coaching business, kind of taking everything that I did in a psychiatric setting. I've facilitated hundreds of groups over that time. In Seattle, I was working 12.5-hour shifts. So I would do up to 5 groups a day. So it really adds up. And yeah, so now I'm taking those skills and applying them to the corporate setting and wanting to work with individuals that are still getting up out of bed, still performing and functioning in their daily lives rather than waiting for it to be at the lowest of the low, wanting to end their lives or just not seeing any way out. Healthcare is such a reactive system here rather than preventive. And I really wanted to take a more preventive approach. And that's kind of how I landed where I have.
Wow, you must have gained a lot of experience being in those rooms. That's wild.
Yes. And as a 24-year-old who came out of Nebraska and Kansas, honestly, I had experienced nothing in terms of the harsh realities of what life could be. And I was a terrible therapist. I hadn't been through anything. So the thing that, my then boyfriend would tell me is that, a caring therapist is rated as highly as a good therapist, Kirsten. So just keep caring. And my patients could definitely tell I cared. And that's how, we would connect. And it saved me, honestly, because otherwise I had no experience to draw from, really.
Yeah. What were some of the conversations that you were having in those groups?
Oh, with the patient setting? Yeah. So that was communication. It was really learning a lot of the basic kind of interpersonal skills, communication, how to have healthy boundaries. And of course, this was more applied to their personal lives. Mm-hmm. And now I'm kind of trying to apply it to work. But having healthy boundaries, what a healthy daily schedule even looks like, the importance of sleep and sleep hygiene, as well as eating, decent foods, getting some activity during the day. I did work on cognitive distortions, which is a big passion of mine. The idea that every feeling we have and every action we take starts with a thought. And so if we want to feel differently or behave differently, we have to target those thoughts. And a lot of people don't really think about or recognize that we can change the way that we think just by really challenging those thoughts and reframing them. So that's a lot of what I did in that setting and what I do now with my one-on-one clients.
Yeah. Why do you think that this isn't specifically what you just said about, not turning every thought into an action or believing every thought? Why do you think that's not something that's just taught to us when we're younger or even as a teenager?
Man, what a good question. I mean, I hate to go down this road, but I think, our school systems are set up to create employees and to create people that kind of conform to a certain way of thought and doing. And so really our schools are not encouraging a lot of individualism to begin with, and we're not learning how to adult as far as taxes or like what a mortgage is. Yeah. I mean, I didn't know that.
Let alone mental health.
Let alone mental health. So, it's like we're learning a certain prescribed, set of curriculum that doesn't really match with how to be a well-rounded adult at all, and there's really no discussion on emotional or mental health and I actually, when I talk to people now about my business, I say that I'm teaching all the skills that we're assumed to know and have, but we've never been taught. Basic communication, we've never been taught this, and we have no idea really what it means to be assertive versus aggressive, or a lot of people haven't even thought about how I'm coming off when I communicate a certain way. And it's really sad, but our school systems don't emphasize any of that whatsoever,
Yeah, that's so true. As you were talking, I was thinking about my business. I own a social media management business, and I sometimes have such a hard time balancing the communication between a professional and where I want to come off more personable and vulnerable, but still in this role of like, oh, I'm a business owner, I have to be professional, right? And it's like, okay, well, personally, I don't want it to be all buttoned up. Like, I want to just have this interaction with my clients that's very fun and organic. But you get caught in that because we're taught, like, you go to school and you're a professional and you button up and it's all these things. And it's like, oh my gosh, well, what would life be like if sometimes we just weren't like that?
I love that point, Cassidy, because I'm sure you feel the same, that I'm also hyper aware of me being a woman in business too. Yes. With what I'm wearing, with what I'm saying. I mean, people, there's always going to be someone that has something to say, and I try to keep that in mind. But it's also, I think, ingrained in us that we should look a certain way or show up a certain way. And it really is a difficult balance to try to figure out who am I and like who is my authentic self versus what are people expecting me to be and looking at me to be or judging me whether I am or am not,
Yeah. And to not go into that obsessive cycle within yourself, right? Because that'll happen to me. Like, let's say a certain email chain went out and I'm perceiving what they said. It might not even be right? Correct. And then now I'm stuck on it and it's affecting all the other emails I send that day because I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to be perceived because of how this email went. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, and quick question. Are you a person, because I'm a person that says I run anxious. Are you a person that runs anxious? Okay.
Oh, yes.
Because then, yes, we are second guessing someone's tone with us in an email or a text and how we come off 1,000%. And I actually suggest in a lot of my workshops to my corporate clients, if you can have a conversation over the phone or a face-to-face conversation, always choose that. Because otherwise people are getting so caught up in, how their communication is coming off and exclamation points versus emojis and, all these things. I'm a person that would send a smiley emoji after everything I said because I want anyone to know
I want to come off
that
nice.
I'm saying, Yeah, that I'm nice and I'm coming off in a playful manner. Like I come from a family that has a very special sense of like sarcasm, and we give each other a hard time in a lot of ways. And my sarcasm can definitely be misinterpreted here on the West Coast in both
Yes.
Seattle and in Las Vegas. But I'm like the one that's I have to try not to overuse my emojis because, I'm trying to be professional as well. So,
Yes, and make sure it lands the way you want it to land.
yes.
How can we navigate those running thoughts? And then on the other side, like, what part of communication do you see? I mean, I guess we could talk both professionally and personally. I know it's different, that we could improve on, or something that's maybe a common thread that you see that you help coach people through.
Well, I'll start with the running thoughts, and that is actually a lot of what I target with my one-on-one clients because we all have this, self-talk, which again, research says we have 60,000 thoughts a day, which is wild. So imagine that even half of those, maybe even a fourth of those are critical, or condemning or negative in whatever way. That is just so much of our day and our mental space and all of that. So, again, what I work with people to do is really reframe and challenge and question our own thought processes and patterns. And I use a pretty structured way to do that. But just in general, again, as someone who runs anxious, I'm a person that also has had to, work on that myself. And really, part of it is reminding myself that no matter what we do and who we are and how we show up, someone's going to have something to say. It's like I heard this little saying that even the juiciest, ripest peach will have, like, there's someone that doesn't like peaches, which that's just the way it is. And so part of it is accepting that. And I think honestly, one of the things that has helped me the most is in my real estate, my 4 years in commercial real estate, I had so much disappointment because it overlapped with COVID. And it was just a really tough time to
Oh,
be starting commercial real estate.
yes.
I did, to be fair, I did the 6 months before COVID. Obviously, had no idea that was coming. But it really helped me brush a lot kind of like off my back and let things run off me. I'm not crushed by things in the way that I was. And I think that part of that is truly just going through it, which is
Resilience.
terrible. Yeah, you're just building a resilience, having to go through those things. And just, it's like you can't get, also, and I tell people all the time, it doesn't feel good to get that worked up. It doesn't feel good to be anxious all day. So it's like, how do I actually change that? Because it's not fun. It doesn't feel good. And then it's the process of kind of reframing those thoughts and challenging them, which, everything's on YouTube. You can pretty much teach yourself everything on YouTube, or you can talk with a therapist or a coach and, kind of work through how to best do that.
It's, I think the hardest part of the reframing is stopping those thoughts. Like, right now they're just running rampant, right? And eventually you're going to be able to get better to recognize maybe one or two a day. And then the more you do it and reevaluating those every single time.
And I love to say this when people say exactly what you just said, Cassidy. I don't want people to get in a power struggle with their thoughts. I actually don't want them to be like, I have to stop this. I have to fight these. Like, because then there's a tension there.
Yeah.
And it's really more just, like you said, acknowledging it and letting it run through. Like, okay, I just caught that I called myself a worthless piece of crap because I didn't get done what I was supposed to do today. I can acknowledge it. And it's like, okay, I acknowledge it. I let it kind of run through. And I challenge that thought with saying, you know what? Everyone needs some rest. Everyone needs some time to chill. We are not machines. We are not made to be productive 99% out of our day. And so, again, it's changing that whole belief system. But number one, it is being aware of it and catching them. And then number two, it's not being critical about the negative thought, because then it's just this revolving door of criticism and negativity. It's just, okay, this is the way that my family spoke or thought. This is the way my parents or, parental figures thought or spoke. And I'm trying to change this. Like, it's just grace,
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think one thing that helps me too that my therapist taught me is I think it's an acronym, Q-tip, and she says, quit taking it personal. And I use that all the time in my business, right? Because I could put out my best work and create the best social media account and do all the things, and someone's not going to like it. And
Correct.
someone's going to have
You could be the
edits.
juiciest peach.
Yes, exactly as you just said. So it's like, quit taking it personal. Do what you can do. And at the end of the day, there's times where it just doesn't work out, right? It's just it's not meshing, and accept that and move on. What do you find is a common pattern or just struggle for communication wise with your clients?
Well, oh man. I mean, there's so many things. I think too, so taking it personally is actually one of the cognitive distortions that I discuss with my clients too, because that's a big one. And so as far as communication goes, I think what can happen, especially in a work setting where you have all these different people coming together with different backgrounds, different experiences, is that someone can take it personally and or get defensive. And getting defensive is a really tough thing, because it's coming out of a place of insecurity. Like, the person feels like they're being questioned, or maybe their intelligence or their contribution is being questioned. It's coming out of an insecurity, which we know, but it allows for no further discussion. It is a real roadblock, because whenever we sense someone else getting defensive, then it heightens our walls, and then there's really nothing productive that can come from it. So I think that's one big deterrent to communication going well or flowing. I mean, there's so many, but I think that's one where people can identify it pretty easily. It's just, what do they actually do about it? Not usually anything.
So how do you handle a defensive person?
Well, I think that it really depends on your relationship with that person too, because if you have no rapport, that person is not going to be listening to anything you have to say anyway, But for me, if it's someone I have a rapport with and I've kind of built that over time, it would be addressing it not in that moment, like, emotions are high. If you're already in this kind of heightened defensive state, then we're just going to table it. Okay, we'll talk about it later. And then coming back to the person. And again, as an anxious person, I'm like, I care so much about you. Like, I'm going to do everything I can to soften this blow. And it's going to be like, I really want to have some free flowing conversation and be able to communicate. And it's really tough for me. Again, I statements. So this is a whole conversation with communication too, is I statements versus you statements. We're not going to get anywhere by saying like, you get so defensive. Why do you do this? And so again, I feel like we get to a point where we can't really move past when it feels to me that you get a little touchy or sensitive about X, Y, and Z. And I've seen it with this, in this example or this example. And again, so much of that depends on the rapport that you have with the person. Because if you guys are not in a good place, honestly, that person is really not going to hear anything you have to say,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that is such a hard lesson to learn, to switch the you and the I. I don't know if it's just things we've been taught growing up, but it's so natural to just like place blame on that person, to be like, well, then you did that. And one, not take accountability, but two, not really see how that sounds to the other person, even if you're not trying to blame it on them. It's like an attack, like you. And it could be so hard for that language to switch, and you have to be so mindful when you're having that conversation of like, I.
Yeah. And, it is definitely taking accountability, which also the person who's getting defensive isn't doing. And that's why we're not moving past it either, because really, I'm never going to move past anything that someone is not taking responsibility for, unfortunately, right? But also, I think that it's like you said, being sensitive to the fact that, we're in a position where neither side really wants to be seen as like the bad guy, or like none of us want to be all the fully to blame for anything, right? Like that is the way
and usually you're not, right? Like both parties have some sort of responsibility.
Correct. Right. And so that's what makes something like that really impossible, because that person that's getting defensive is not allowing you to move past anything, right? And then if you both get defensive, man, it just is, it's going to be a mess.
It's going to be a long fight.
Yeah, it's going to be a long chat. It's going to be a long, or actually probably not going to get anywhere. Yeah.
I think you brought up a good point of taking space before you go back into the conversation, taking a pause, maybe waiting a day, gathering your thoughts before you go in it. Do you have any other tips or advice if someone is working through maybe a tough part of their relationship, or they're working on communicating something to a coworker or a boss that could better prepare them to go into that conversation?
I actually think that taking some moments to think about what you're going to say is a great guideline to live by for most important conversations, even if emotions aren't technically high or like it's a tense situation. And it could be partly because I'm an overthinker and I love to just stew and brew over something.
Same.
But what I have learned is that if I am having an important conversation almost immediately, there's going to be so many things that I think of later that I wanted to address. And if I can just give it a moment, it takes a lot of self-control. It takes a lot of restraint. This is something that it is still a tough thing, I think, in my older years, but it's something I've really worked on the last few years. Is one, even if I have something I want to say to like a loved one, for example, over text, do not text it, okay? Do not text it, because you're already setting yourself up for misinterpretations and things to be misconstrued. So, again, like say with a significant other or a sibling or a parent that you just want to fire off that thing to, man, if you can wait until you have either a phone call or an in-person call, and my notes are full of my random thoughts. Like I want to say this and that, and I get it down, and it doesn't really have to be organized per se. It just is like out. And so I get them down, and then I can have this conversation where I actually feel like I've gotten everything off my chest, and I have been able to say all I have to say, and whatever that person, how they respond is how they respond. But I feel better that I've gotten out kind of my portion of it, And so I think that the more that people realize there can be time and space between what I think and what I say and I do, then it really sets us up for better communication and relationships, because I'm not saying things impulsively. I'm not saying hurtful things. It's probably the biggest tip I would say for improving communication with our loved ones.
And I think when you write those things down and then you reflect on them, let's say an hour later, it may change. You may be like, oh, I don't know if I want to say that. And I think that's why texting can be so hard, because you're writing it in the moment most of the time. And you don't know how they're going to respond to it. You don't know what tone of voice they're reading it in.
Correct.
But it is the easier way, right? Like we are looking for the easier way out. I don't have to face them. I don't have to hear their tone of voice. So let me just send this text. And it just because it's easier does not mean you're going to have a better result.
You could pay for it later.
Yeah.
It might be easy in the moment, but it's not going to be easier later. And to your point, there are lots of times where the things I write out in my notes, I will omit, this one and that one and this one, or
especially where the conversation goes, right? Like you may leave a whole part out because you're like, okay, I'm not going to go there this time.
Yeah. And it's not really appropriate, or it's, again, how I feel incensed in the moment, but it's not truly how I feel. So man, the self-control and restraint that come with that is something we're all striving to be.
Yes. Well, and I think it goes to show like communication is difficult no matter what. Like there's professional, there's communicating with parents, communicating with romantic partner, even I assume communicating with children, right? Like there's all these different layers, and you have to have so much grace for both yourself and the other party, because you never know where they're coming from. Like maybe they were just in traffic and it was crazy and they're in road rage and now they're coming to this appointment, right? Like there's so many other factors. And I think if we can all go in with more grace for both ourselves and the other person and meet each other where they're at, you're already starting at a better point than starting in the chaos and just blowing up on each other.
For sure.
I want to talk more on your wellness and all the things that you do, because that's how I was really introduced to you with Vegas Young Professionals, is talking about health and wellness. And I think that there are so many daily habits, daily mindset practices that contribute to this conversation of communication, of interpersonal skills, and all of these things. And it really starts with us, and it starts by taking care of ourselves. So would love for you to share some of the things that you've found in your both professional and your personal life that have helped you stay grounded and really achieve another level of wellness.
And keep my sanity. That's the important part. Okay.
Yes.
Because you can relate to the fact that being an entrepreneur is very difficult.
Not for the faint of heart.
So many reasons.
Yes.
And I say all the time, I didn't intend to be. This is not anything I ever wished for, longed for, dreamed of, had a goal of. It just kind of happened. And so it's been a rocky road, but also there are a number of things I have to do to kind of keep my sanity. And I am such a huge advocate for sleep. Everyone in my life can tell you I harp on them about sleep and ask them if they're sleeping and how much sleep they're getting, and not relying on caffeine or something else when you don't have to, because again, and my dear friends, they have 2 sets of twins. And they are downing the Red Bulls, okay? And I have no judgment because they have 2 sets of twins under 2 years old.
Oh, yes, my goodness. Wow.
Exactly.
They are the real heroes here.
Yes, they are. But for me, I don't have kids. So guess what? I should be sleeping. Like that should be a priority. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I need a lot of sleep. I wish I was the person that could get by on 5 hours, but that's not me. Mm-hmm. So I really try to get between like 8 and 9 hours any day that I can. Huge priority to me. And so I am sleeping, I eat. I'm like an 80-20 person as far as like eating well. And then kind of my 20% of, I bought ice cream at Whole Foods last night that is like ridiculous, cookies, and I'll get all the Oreo, brownie, salted caramel. There's no like fruit. Yeah, it's not like this is the healthy kind. No, it's not. And so, and I'll eat like the burger and fries, I'll eat pizza. I love all these things, but I kind of go by this 80-20. For the most part, I'm eating pretty well because I feel better that way. And I do work out, also huge for my anxiety, because that is like my hour to hour and a half, probably 4 to 5 days a week that I'm taken out of just everything else that's running through my brain. It's really that time where I don't have the to-do list, or did I remember this? Am I going to do that? That kind of thing. So that's super important for me. And just in general, because I'm talking to people about communication and resolving conflict and all of that, I am by no means perfect. I will never be. Like it's, impossible to be. But I take very seriously that if I have, something with a friend or a family member or whatever, that I actually address it and I say the hard thing and I do the hard thing because I'm also telling people to do this, you know? And I don't want my clients to ever think that I am like a hypocrite or I'm not willing to take my own advice or do what I'm, proposing they do, because it's really important to me to have good communication with my loved ones. And it's really important to me that I'm building trust with them and I'm showing up as a reliable, consistent, trustworthy person. So I take all of those things really seriously too, being a person of my word, doing what I say I will. Also, I don't drink. It's really rare that I drink alcohol because it just makes me feel like crap. Like just the next day, I just feel like crap. And I don't need any help with that. Like there's, me not getting enough sleep already makes me feel like crap or whatever. So, I don't really drink. I am a night owl, so I will have the occasional night out till 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. I'm not above it. I will do it. But believe it or not, I'm completely sober when it happens. So it's still about balance for me, for sure. What I do during the day and during the week takes a lot of energy, and I have to be kind of on a lot with my workshops, with my one-on-ones, with the networking that I do. And so I will have a Saturday or a Sunday where I literally watch 5 hours of television just straight. And it makes me so happy. I love it.
I love to, because I think so often it's like shamed, like, oh my gosh, you're watching television. It's like,
yes,
why can't we just rot? It's a wonderful thing to do.
Justice for TV, okay?
Exactly.
Because guess what? I love to read. I love to read as well.
Me too.
But reading takes energy, and everything that I do all day long takes energy. So I'm like, if I want to sit in front of the TV and watch Muslim Matchmaker, which is what I did this last weekend, it was so entertaining. I love a matchmaker show.
Oh yeah.
I will do that.
Yeah.
So yeah. And
it's
I don't
giving
want to
yourself
be guilted
that permission.
about it.
No, and if
Exactly.
you've given yourself permission, then you deserve to do all of that. I love everything that you said, because it's always a common theme when I talk to female founders of like, okay, I get sleep, I prioritize working out, like, and then the common theme is like, and I'm not perfect, and I don't do it all the time, and not everyone's the same. And it's like, it doesn't matter if I interview a mom with 3 kids that has a business, or, a single woman that has a business. Like, we're all in the same boat, and we're all just trying to do our best. But these are things that we know do help and do make things better. Do you feel like these practices have helped you in times of in between? Like, you've been able to rely on them to sustain energy, to maintain a sense of sanity?
I actually think that during COVID, when I was depressed for the first time truly in my life, and my anxiety was through the roof for the first time in my life, working out was like the only sanity I had, because everything was so uncertain. We couldn't see people, we couldn't see family, we couldn't do the things that we were used to doing. I had no workplace to go to and have that community. My work family in both Seattle and Baltimore, they were my family. Like, my coworkers were my family. And it's actually really hard for me as a person that has my own business to not have coworkers in the same way, because I love them. I've always, had such a strong bond with my coworkers. So to be working out of my home and then have no work during COVID, I was losing my mind. And so really working out was like the only thing I had. And I got super lean, which I lost too much weight, and I was, it kind of goes along with the wasn't eating enough, all kinds of things during that depressed period. But it really is what kind of kept me afloat in some ways. My sleep wasn't great because I was so anxious, right? And so it's like I was still trying to hold on to the building blocks. I just didn't have a great grasp because of how poorly I felt, but I was trying.
Yeah. Well, and that's the key, right? To the in-between. Because when you're in a downside and you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do or how I'm going to get out of this. It's like, okay, look for the light, and maybe it is working out. Maybe it is getting extra sleep. It might not be all the things. It might be none of those things, right? But you're trying and you're just you're keeping on swimming and just trying to stay afloat. And I was similar during a bout of depression. Like I would tell my doctor, I'm like, it's so strange. Like I can get up every day and go to the gym and then I have to go back to bed. Like I don't have energy for anything else. But it was like that with 1 hour, like if I did that, I felt good. And everything else, trying to get a job, trying to do this, like was too much energy. And so it's interesting that like even in such a bout of depression, even in just so much sadness, you're able to find some amount of light to keep you going. And if you can attach yourself to that, eventually that continued to be the thing that made me so happy. And eventually the rest of the energy started coming back.
Well, and I will say that I am just really grateful and fortunate that I don't have any family history of depression, of anxiety, of bipolar disorder, anything like that, because I think that is the only reason it was something semi-manageable for me to work my way out of, you know. For a lot of my clients and patients who have that level of, you know, depression, and man, it is, all of the daily habits help and can do wonders. But for so many of them, they also have, you know, that chemical imbalance in their brain, and they have to have medication. And, you know, that's okay. And that's fine. If, you know, you can find what works for you, then that's really what matters. But I just really, again, from having an experience like that I had never had before, I was always an empathetic person. I've always been an empathetic person, but truly now I understand so many more things than I did, say, 10 years ago or 15 years ago when I started this journey as a therapist, you know?
Yeah. And I think it's important to say that, like, if you're listening to this and you are battling some sort of mental health, like there is a fine line between being able to maybe get yourself out of it versus needing intervention like medication, any sort of treatment like that. So obviously see a doctor either way and get a professional opinion as to where you are. I think it can switch over so fast and become something a lot bigger than we're able to manage. So yeah, definitely see a provider for that.
For sure. Yeah. And it's important to say, because I saw people who were doing everything quote unquote right. Honestly, they were trying their best to take care of themselves. They were seeing a therapist. They were eating, you know, decently well. They were trying to get sleep, all those things. And a severe mental illness is a severe mental illness. And they needed more than the things that we've talked about, you know, and that just is the way it is. And I wish more people understood that and had less judgment for it, you know, like I wish there was less stigma for it, because it's the luck of the draw, guys. Like I'm just lucky it wasn't me, quote unquote, lucky it wasn't me. I don't know, but it could have been. I know that I am a fine line of life experiences away from Lord knows what. And I just wish everyone had that perspective, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's chat a little bit about your podcast, because you're a fellow podcaster, and I would love to hear what your podcast is about and why you chose to start it.
Yeah, thank you. So my podcast is called Peace of Wellness Podcast, which is just the name of my business as well. And a little over a year ago, I had really felt a calling, honestly, a push or a propulsion to start a men's group. And so many people are saying, why did a woman start a men's group? Number one, because there's very few out there, and I welcome anyone to do it. Any man can surely do this, but there's very few. And I really saw a need for it in a different way than, and I wonder if you feel the same, Cassidy. We could go to a women's group every single day if we wanted to.
Yes.
There are so many here in Vegas. Yep. So many, which is wonderful. I love that for us, you know?
Yep.
But there are very few groups dedicated to men's either creating community, connecting, having real conversations. That's what the
Especially
goal
that. Yeah.
for mine were, right? And it's funny, when I first had my very first open to the public workshop, every single person I shared the flyer and the QR code with was a woman. Because I'm like, who's going to come talk about boundaries? Obviously, women. And every single workshop I did, I had more men than women attend, every single one. And I was
Wow.
like, maybe I'm off on who my audience is, right? And so that was kind of the beginning. And then I've had a number of male clients, one-on-one clients, who have shared with me that they really don't have a lot of great supports as far as people to bounce ideas off of, or even like run these major decisions by, like major life decisions. Well, and I don't know if this goes for you. I have about 10 women I could talk to really at any given time about how my life is going, and that would really show a genuine interest, because that's a relationship I have had with them and have had for a long time. So I'm like, man, some of these men really don't have much of anyone. And that's not to say a number of the men I've come into contact with have really strong supports and have built beautiful communities, and that's amazing. And I really commend them. But there is a population, and certainly, people that have moved to Vegas recently, like myself, it's a tough place to build community in general compared to other places I've lived. And I'm just meeting all these men that don't really have a whole lot of people. And so I, felt compelled to start an in-person men's group. It was 6 sessions every other week for 3 months. And it was so wonderful. I had a topic for each one. So again, it would be communication or boundaries, letting go of control. And I would have kind of a loose framework of a lesson of sorts from me, and then open discussion with the men, where then the men were asking each other questions, responding to what they were sharing. Like, it was such a lovely thing. And I got great feedback. It was a great experience. I will just say, having an event every other week is a lot of work. I am not an event planner. I really don't want to be planning a bunch of events personally, because that's just a full-time job, honestly. But it was such a great experience, and we were having such amazing conversations that it kind of evolved into this podcast idea. It had sort of been pitched to me a couple of times by a couple of people to kind of create content as far as classes or courses and be putting them out. I don't love that, because what I personally feel my magic is in the interaction with others. Based on what they say to me, I have responses, that are impactful, rather than me just sitting here giving like an hour of a lecture. That it's not really my preference. And so that's how it kind of evolved into this podcast idea of having 2 different men from different backgrounds, having different perspectives, come and discuss a certain topic. And so the very first one was a judge and a man who was sentenced to 213 years in prison.
Wow.
And served 20 years. And so the 3 of us have a conversation about, mental health, overcoming imposter syndrome and other setbacks. That was really lovely. The second one is a 48-year-old and a 28-year-old talking about how they choose to stay faithful in their marriages. Like, what does that look like as a daily practice? What does that look like on the day-to-day? The third one is 2 gentlemen talking about how they are managing grief after their parents have passed, and so on and so forth, right? A bunch of different topics that, again, I put a lot of energy or thought into who fits the topic. I'm meeting all of these men networking, like through networking events, through the gym, through friends, that kind of thing. And so I do put a lot of effort into, who can come and discuss this topic, and it really pertains to them. But it's been such a wonderful experience. I've really enjoyed it. The men have been so open and willing to share, what can be vulnerable topics. And This episode that I'm releasing in a week is actually a first generation immigrant from Peru and a first generation immigrant from Eritrea, talking about the process of their families, getting citizenship, moving here, all of that. And, it's just some of them are vulnerable topics and sensitive topics. And all of the men have been just so wonderful and willing to share and be open in sharing. And so I've really enjoyed it.
That's incredible. And I do believe that's a huge mission and a huge undertaking, because it's true. And I don't think it's just a problem in Las Vegas. I think as a society, we have told men to not share their emotions, not share their stories, not share their whys or their dreams. And we're like, go to work and come home and provide and do all these things and
be
keep
a
your
provider.
mouth, keep your mouth shut. And it's so true.
And just do the thing.
Yeah. I mean, even just like you just said, if you ask them like, okay, well, are you going to talk to your friends about this? Are you going to do that? No, they don't talk. And so it's very interesting how as a culture created that, and we've made it a conversation, and now we almost have to redo what we've created, right? Because we're like, well, we don't want little boys to learn this.
We need to redo it. There's actually a reel that I saw on Instagram that was so funny, because it was a husband coming home to his wife after golfing with his friend for like 5 hours. And the wife's like, how is so-and-so doing? Like, oh, he's good. Well, is he handling his divorce okay? Like, they were like huge topics. And he's like, I don't know. Like,
they don't talk.
They were together for 5 hours and they didn't ask each other one, like, beyond the surface question. And that's so true for a number of men, not for all men, but a number of men.
Yes.
And I hate that for them, because.
Well, and it's funny because as someone who's gone to therapy, I'm 29 now, and I've been going to therapy since I was about 15. I've always been taught the concept of like, who's your counsel, right? Like, who are your mentors, and then who are your best friends, and who are the 3 people that, like, if you have a huge decision to make, you can bounce it off of them and they're going to reflect you. They're not going to give you their opinions, right? Like all these different, what I would say are my tools in my toolkit, these people, right? Yeah. And men don't understand that, right? Like some men, correct. Yes. They believe that they should know all those answers or take care of it on their own. And it's this divide that then is created because it's like, oh my gosh, we're so much stronger in numbers and having more brains and more ideas and more thoughts. And it's like, it's so scary to present those things to other people and ask for help or ask for even just, hey, this is what I view, how I view it. How do you view it? That's scary too.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. And so, a number of men and women, to be fair, it's just that my topic for this is men, right?
Of course.
Definitely are not asking for help because that's super scary sounding,
Well, and that goes to the whole mental health conversation.
Yeah, that's a whole another conversation. But yeah, it's really, the whole goal of the podcast is to help encourage men to connect and have these real conversations and show men in the audience that men are, capable and willing and embracing this kind of thing, as well as just having conversation points. And also, to be fair, not just between men, because I've done a couple of the podcasts that are geared more toward relationships, and they've been really great conversation points for couples that have maybe kind of had difficulty broaching certain topics with their partners, but then, having these conversations kind of just in front of their faces, then being able to ask questions related to that. So what I love about them is they're also kind of a conversation piece for people to be able to connect and have some deeper conversations, but also a reflection for individuals to say like, oh, wow, have I thought about this? Have I ever, considered something like this? And so, yeah, that's really the goal. And just really kind of break some stereotypes that we have just about men in general and different races of men and different men of different backgrounds and things like that. So it's been a passion project for sure.
I think that's incredible. And I think what you're doing isn't just going to impact like the men currently listening to it. I think the greater impact, right, falls on their sons or their grandsons and the lineage that they're holding, because it's going to change the conversations that they're having in their homes. And even if they're not on the podcast, just listening. So it's like that greater impact. I mean, even I have 2 nephews. It's like, that's so special to think about the conversations that could be different as they grow up.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
There's a ripple effect to everything we do, and I don't know if you feel similarly, but doing the podcast, it's really just been, again, such a passion of mine. That's enough for me to want to do it.
Yes.
I never even really
No, I always say, I'm like, it's purely selfish because I learned so much and I love it so much.
Yes.
And then I'm like, okay, I hope someone else is listening to this and getting as much as I am. So I totally agree.
Right. Exactly. And so I'm not really even thinking of necessarily those several steps out or in the future. It's really just like, I love it. I love the conversation. I love how the men are showing up. I love that their families and their friends are super excited about it. I love even just that small interior circle of what happens,
Oh, that is incredible. Well, I always love to end the podcast and ask what advice you would give someone who is currently listening and in the in-between.
Well, you prepped me for this question, luckily, on the sheet, because sometimes I just draw a blank with these kinds of large, open-ended questions. But what came to me with that is that I really would love to emphasize the importance of pivoting. That has been so impactful for me because, once again, I was a person, I hate to say it, I had not experienced much failure prior to COVID and entrepreneurship. So if you haven't experienced a whole lot of failure, you're not experiencing a whole lot of disappointment. Mm-hmm. And it's extremely humbling to get your ass kicked over and over, which is what entrepreneurship is.
Yep.
And I think for me, just truly the number of times that I have pivoted is what has kept me afloat. That's what really allows us to remain in the game, I think. Because if you're too attached, if you're too headstrong about it looking a certain way or being a certain way, I think that you're going to be disappointed, because I don't know of anyone who started out envisioning A and ending up at A, there's so much that happens that, the path is winding. And so I think the more that we are able to let the disappointment slide off our back, pivot, adjust, and just let be what comes, I personally think that is best for our mental health. And I say all the time, I'm not attached to Piece of Wellness being what it is today. Sure, I'm doing workshops, I'm doing the podcast, I do some moderating or hosting, and I enjoy all of these things. But that may not be what it is in a year or 2 years or 5 years. And I'm okay with that, So I personally think that's what has kind of allowed my journey to continue, to be fair.
I love that you said pivot. I don't know if we've had someone say pivot. Maybe one other time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I feel like that's a newer response, but I love it because you're so right. We all set out for these dreams and think we're going to achieve A, and we don't end up at A, but we still maybe achieve those dreams, right? Or the dream looks, I love that's your response. And I think if you bring success into the conversation, it redefines success for you completely, because it's not an end goal. It's everything leading up to it. And then reflecting on what came from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And ultimately, for me, I just genuinely want to help people be well. And that can look a million different ways, And so again, I don't really know what it's going to be, but I'm open to, doing it any which way, I would say.
Yeah.
So I think that is what probably kind of helps me in the day to day, not put too much pressure, on myself or force things. I kind of used to force things a little too much.
Yeah, no, I would do the same if I wanted to hit a different goal. And that's why I restructure goals differently now, because it's like I'm of a type A to be like, okay, I need to achieve all of this to get here. But goal may be different a year from now, even 6 months from now. So it's reevaluating and it's pivoting, as you said.
And adjusting, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I would love for you to share with my audience where they can follow you and listen to your podcast.
Oh, yeah, perfect. So on Instagram, it's my first name, Kirsten, Kirsten, period, my middle name, Linnea. And the Peace of Wellness podcast is on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the different kind of streaming arenas. And then Kirsten Larsen, I am on LinkedIn as well. And so, yeah, that's where I can be found.
Awesome. Well, we will put all your info in the show notes as well. And Perfect. Thank you so much for being on this podcast. If you're listening, make sure you follow In Between Convos on Instagram, and we will catch you next week.